Okay, now we're looking at Phyrexian Marauder from Visions. It's an X cost artifact creature, where X is the amount of +1/+1 counters you get on it when it comes into play. But you also have to pay 1 for each counter to attack. So on the face of it, it's a bad card. Can't block. You've got to pump mana into it to attack. So yes, the card is pretty weak on the face of it. It's got no game-hitting impact, but +1/+1 counters is a popular thing. A lot of people like to play these kind of cards with hardened scales or doubling season, and there are some artifact strategies that work around it with Arcbound Ravager and Modular and things like that. So the main problem with this card is that it's been outclassed. You've got cards like Endless One, which don't have the downsides, and then you've got cards like Stonecoil Serpent, which are straight up just got additional benefits. Has been outclassed already. The only reason it'll ever be popular is if people want multiples of that kind of effect on a card, and then after they've expended all the better versions, and then they'll dip back into something like this. So it's unlikely to have a high monetary value into the future. Okay, so Dark Pact, 3 black mana, sorcery. This card doesn't actually see any play. It's an anti-card, and no one plays anti-cards anymore. So it doesn't really have anything going for it. I mean, it's the one thing it has got is it's Quinton Hoover artist, so for that purpose it might be popular, but the card itself unlikely to have a high monetary value going forward. Okay, Nature's Wrath, 4 and 2 green, so 6 mana for an enchantment, and during upkeep you pay 1 green or you destroy Nature's Wrath. And okay, so this kind of card is commonly known as a hate card. You play it, and then people who play specific other colors of cards get affected negatively. And in this case, whenever a player puts a swamp or a black permanent into play, they have to sacrifice a swamp or a black permanent, and then if they play an island or a blue permanent, then they have to sacrifice an island or blue permanent. So it's pretty devastating, but then you got a few problems. So if your opponents aren't playing black or blue, it's useless. That's one of the problems. The other problem is the kind of gameplay that it's going to foster is something that maybe isn't popular. People don't like these kind of cards or playing against these kind of cards and effects. And also it's 6 mana, so you're going to need to, like, if there's something you want to be hurting people, you probably want to be doing it much earlier in earlier turns. But that being said, it's still pretty good even late game. It sort of stops your opponents from getting their groove on. But yeah. Yes, so probably not worth specking on. Next up is Zephyr from Urza Saga. So it's 6 mana, that's 4 and 2 blue, for a 3/4 flying creature that can't be the target of spells or abilities. So back then, hard to deal with permanents were popular. That was a avenue that they were pushing the game. So, you know, you play a permanent that the opponent can't deal with, and you just ride it home to victory. It's not really good anymore. You're overpaying for the stats on the creature, and what benefit are you going to get? It's hard to win that way anymore. And the way the game's going today, there's all these other ways to destroy creatures without targeting them, but also the power creep is so high that a creature like this that you're going to sit on for 10 turns isn't really as good as playing some mega bomb these days that will just win the game in 1 or 2 turns. So it's not likely to have much monetary value. And then we have Circle of Despair, which is 1 colorless, a white, and a black mana, so 3 mana enchantment. and it works sort of like a circle of protection. You pay 1 and you sacrifice a creature, and then you can prevent all the damage to any creature or player from one source. So it's not particularly useful. Um, it doesn't really have a home, no one really plays it, but it does have the ability to generate a sacrifice trigger because part of the cost of activating is to sacrifice. But you have to pay a mana as well, so it's not infinite usability unless you have infinite mana. But eventually, it will work well with something that requires sacrifice and generates the trigger. But monetarily wise, until you see the combo potential, it's not really worth anything. Then we have Kevek's Spite, 3 black mana, instant. You have to sacrifice all permanents, discard your hand for target player to lose 5 life. So there's a big cost to using the card. I wonder where that is usable, what situation that works in. But no one's broken it. It's not really part of any strategy, so it's got no. And it's a pretty weak card if you're just trying to play it for the target player loses 5 life. So monetarily wise, it's not really likely to be worth much. Next is Ashnod's Silex. It's a 2 mana artifact. It costs 3 to activate, and it's pretty much like Fate Sealing. I can't see when it would be super useful, but you can target an opponent, you can target yourself, and whoever is targeted looks at the top 3 cards of their library, puts 1 back on top, and removes the remaining 1 from the game, or the remaining 2 cards from the game. It's pretty weak. You're not drawing a card, so there's other cards for the mana input that would just straight up draw you a card, which is a lot better than this kind of filtering, because you don't even end up drawing the card, you put it back on top of your library. Unless that's some kind of strategy that becomes important, it's unlikely to be worth much, so you can ignore this card monetary wise. Next up, Elkin Lair, 3 and a red. So this card, it's okay. It's got a use. So during every player's turn, that player will have to choose a card around from their hand. They put it aside. If they don't play that card, then it goes to the graveyard. It's okay because it sort of adds a bit of tension to the game. If you're playing against a lot of people who play reactively rather than actively, so they're just sitting back with cards in their hand, waiting to respond to you, playing counter spells, playing removal. This card actually is useful in those situations. Every turn, they're going to randomly have one of their cards put aside, and if they don't play it, they lose it. So it's got a use there. I think it's a bit too weak to be game breaking. It's not really winning the game doing that. But its possibilities are there, and it's got some kind of potential, but probably not too much. So you can sort of ignore it in the monetary concern. Okay, Ebon Praetor, 4 and 2 black, so 6 mana for a 5/5. Trample first strike. Yeah, it's pretty average, and for a creature with just trample and first strike, it's unlikely to ever see play, but it's got an additional ability. So during upkeep, you have to put a -2/-2 counter on the creature, and you can sacrifice a creature to remove the -2/-2 counter. If the creature you sacrificed was a Thrall creature type, you put a +1/+0 counter onto the Ebon Praetor. Only one creature can be sacrificed a turn, so if you miss it for one turn, it gets -2/-2. It's going to be hard to get it off again. So it's pretty weak. It's basically 5/5 with downside. I can't see anybody thinking this is game winning or strong. I mean, 5/5 creatures aren't really that good these days. They're not game breakers. If you really want to win a game, you're just playing big flying dragons, Craterhoof behemoths, things like that. So I don't think this has any future. We have Canopy Dragon, 6 mana, so 4 and 2 green for a 4/4 trample green dragon. And then you can pay 1 and a green, it gains flying and loses trample. So to make it a flying dragon, it loses its trample. That's pretty weak. The stats aren't really that strong. It doesn't have any. Its ability is sort of a downside. There's no ability or effect the card does that swings the game in your favor, and it's pretty bad because there's just better stuff out there. Unlikely to be worth much ever. Okay, we have Meraxis of Keld, which is 4 and 2 red, so 6 mana for a star creature. It's a legend, and it has the power and toughness is equal to the total number of untapped artifacts, creatures, and lands you control. So yeah, on the face of it, it looks like it could be a really big creature, but it's just really bad. The permanents have to be untapped, so if they're tapped, they don't count towards his power and toughness. And he's got no other abilities. He's got no other effect on the game. All you're trying to do is make a big creature. It doesn't have evasion or any kind of other stat defining attributes, so it's just a bad card. I can't see this being worth much. Divine Retribution. So 1 and 1 white, 2 mana, instant. For each attacking creature, Divine Retribution deals 1 damage to target attacking creature. So that's just straight up bad. You're not even destroying the creature, you're just dealing damage to it. And you've got to hope that they attacked with enough that you could deal enough damage to one of them and destroy it. So it's very weak. There's better options to go to, unless you're specifically trying to deal damage to an attacking creature, where I don't even know where that comes up. The card is not very good, so it's unlikely to have a high monetary value. There's always going to be better versions of these kind of effects. And we have Chronotog, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 creature. It's one of the Atog series of creatures. This one's the blue one, where to pump it, you have to skip a turn, and it gets +3/+3 until the end of turn. You can only use the ability once. So, really, are you really going to skip a turn just to make this a 4/5 creature? Probably not. I think the card shines in being able to skip your turn. So if bad things are happening on every player's turn, then you just skip yours and bypass it, and it goes to the next player, and then they get affected. So because you didn't have a turn, whatever happens during turns doesn't happen during your turn. But in that small corner case, otherwise it's not really a useful creature, a useful card. So it's maybe got a slight monetary value, probably not a lot. So I just treat it that way.